Hi, welcome back to my channel and my review for Dune Part 2. So this is the follow-up to the first part of Dune we got from Denis Villeneuve back in 2021. And this was based on a series of science fiction books that date all the way back to the 1960s. And it's a story that has been notoriously difficult to adapt to film just because of how detailed, how complex this series of books were. I've never read them myself, but I do know a little bit about them. And yeah, it's known for being difficult to adapt. David Lynch attempted it back in the 80s, and that movie was very poorly received by critics at the time and said of a lot of it really didn't work. And Denis Villeneuve took a risk by making this film a few years ago now. And just the fact as well that we had no idea that we were going to get a second part. When I first went into it, I had no idea that it was just going to be this sort of part one of a story. And if this film hadn't have succeeded at the box office, we would never have seen a Dune Part 2. It would just be this incomplete, isolated story that left you on a cliffhanger. We'd never have found out how the story went down, what happened to these characters. But thankfully, the film did extremely well, and we've got a new part here with Dune Part 2. And this was easily my most anticipated film for the year. It was actually the top of my list for last year as well, but obviously the film ended up being delayed into 2024. But I knew this thing was going to be good. You know, the amount of care and detail this director puts into his movies. He's a master of science fiction, in my opinion. So I knew this was going to be good, and I'm sure by now, given the film's already been out for a week, you've seen the hype surrounding this. The movie is absolutely incredible. And it's an amazing cinema experience as well, just above getting into all of the characters and the story and everything going on here, just as a cinematic experience. It's pretty phenomenal, so I would really highly advise you all to go and see this still whilst it's at the cinema, because it's probably going to be the best, or if not one of the best movie-going experiences for all of this year, I'm sure of it. I am going to keep this review as spoiler-free as I can. Of course, I won't go into any of the story directions or, you know, any of the reveals with characters or anything like that. I'm just going to give you an outline of my feelings on the film and what I liked about it. But you know, if you don't like hearing anything about a movie, if you want to go in completely blind, you know, what are you doing watching a movie review? Go and see the movie first and then come back to watch this video. So the story picks up here exactly where it left off at the end of part one, with Paul having just won this battle within the Society of the Fremen, and the beginning of the story is all about his sort of integration with the Society of People and him starting to train alongside them and gain their trust. And you have some of these people within this group that sort of do believe all of the prophecies about him, that he is the one that's been sent there to lead them. They're quite religious about him and believe he's the one to sort of bring them salvation, freedom and everything else. And to some extent, he knows he's been called to this position as well. He believes aspects of it, but he has certain visions and nightmares which are kind of guiding him along the way as well. So he's wary. He wants to take things in his own direction as well. But of course, he needs the support of the people. So it's really all about his character development and understanding how this guy is going to rise to power and to be called to power, as his dad says in the previous film, that he's effectively been chosen to be this leader. And it's very interesting. I liked that with his character, it's actually a lot more complex in this film, and the way Timothée Chalamet handled it, I thought was just fantastic. You know, he's a really established actor. He's great at playing the more kind of understanding, the soft, the more gentle characters. And whilst I think that really worked for the first film, I was kind of wondering how that was going to work, like in the second film. How is he going to convince us that he can be this sort of powerful leader that commands respect amongst these people? And he does an amazing job of really convincing you of that. You know, there's some moments where he is really quite intimidating and he kind of takes things in his own direction. He shows people that he's willing to do certain things that other people aren't. And yeah, he's very, very convincing. It really took me aback. And I just wanted to speak about his performance in particular, just because, you know, in Dune Part 2, you've seen the cast for this. You know, it's an amazing bunch of actors. All the additional people they've brought in are all amazing. You don't need me to tell you that. But I just think Timothée Chalamet in particular as Paul, he just brings a lot of heart, complexity, to this character, and I just loved watching his development as this story went on. And I love the fact as well that he is not one-dimensional. He's not this sort of perfect leader that's just good all round, and he's the perfect guy and everyone follows him and they're against the bad guys, and it's as simple as that. Because they're boring stories like that. You don't want to see a story where it's just an unbelievable character that's one-dimensional in that way. And the reality is as well, when you have somebody who's a leader in these kind of situations, there are certain traits about people that could make them a really good leader, which don't necessarily make them nice people to be around or somebody you'd want to be friends with or have a relationship with. And I kind of liked that here, where there are sides to him that are quite dark. He's quite a manipulative character. He tells lies at various points in order to gain people's control and trust and everything like that. And I kind of like those more complex sides to him. And it felt more believable to me as well, because I think that's what a real leader in a situation would actually be like. So you understand why these people not just trust him, but in some way sort of fear him as well. So I like that kind of aspects that were brought to the character here to make it a lot more interesting, because you know how it is in a lot of Hollywood films. You get a leader who's just this perfect person that everybody can live up to, and there's just nothing interesting or believable about that to me. So I really loved what they did with that character here. I really liked the way the film was structured as well, where it spends the whole first hour, it's quite a slow burn, it's really building up all of that story and those characters and giving them all of the focus. And then the second part of the film is really dedicated to seeing the developments with the Harkonnen and the conflict and how that tension is kind of brewing between these two factions. And of course introducing us to this new villain that is played by Austin Butler. Yeah, he's absolutely unrecognisable in this, and it's quite amazing how he's brought in. If you've seen the trailer already, you'll see there's a sort of black and white scene in which he's first introduced, and it's something special to see. It really is. It's a very intimidating character, and all of the stylistic choice about the way they've done that, it's really interestingly done and not forced at all. It might look like they've done a kind of black and white thing just to be artistic about it, but it's not like that. They've got quite an interesting reason as to explain why the area that he's in looks like that. But I loved this about the film, the fact that it takes time to kind of set up one story and then go to another group of characters, because it's actually one of my pet peeves about some movies where you have this kind of exciting conflict all building up and then it ends up flicking back and forth between different characters and different parts of the story. It can take you out of it a bit. So I was actually just watching the original Star Wars trilogy over the past weekend. I do love those films, but I noticed especially like Return of the Jedi, you get to the end and you've got the conflict with Luke, and then suddenly it flicks back to the Ewoks and back, and it ends up being a little bit frustrating to me, where I'm just like, can you just stay on this one conflict please and just focus on that rather than keep jumping between scenes. And I like that Dune 2 does that. It really does give plenty of time to a particular scene to really develop it properly and immerse you in everything that's going on and the experience, and not just having you flick back and thinking, oh, now we've got to see this character, what they're up to, now we've got to see this character. It doesn't do that, and there's something about that I really loved the way they did it here. You know, with this movie, when you think about all the problems that a lot of people, me included, have with the giant, very expensive blockbusters, is, you know, you end up questioning how so much money has gone into something that ends up looking so crap, where you have effects that don't look real, take you out of the story, and situations that don't feel believable, don't really immerse you in what's going on. Everything about it ends up feeling lazy. And Dune Part 2 is literally the opposite and the antithesis to all of those kind of criticisms, where, you know, it's a fantasy world. You know, it's a science fiction film. You've got a lot of effects work here, where you have, you know, giant worms on this sand world. You've got spaceships, all this kind of crazy stuff, and you don't ever end up questioning any of it for any moment. Everything looks absolutely incredible, because, you know, the line between where the practical effects work ends and you start to get into more of the CGI and computer effects work is so seamless. You never notice it at all, and nothing ever doesn't look real. It really is pretty unbelievable what they've managed to do with that. And again, it's just so much care and so much detail has been put into every scene. And I do think the action is used quite sparingly here. It's not just, great big hour-long action sequences of shooting and everything like that. It's like they're really carefully placed and they're so well done that when it hits and you've had time to build up these characters, you're really immersed and connected to everything that's going on. And that, for me, made the action scenes so much more intense than you'd normally get in your average blockbuster. And I think that's a lot of what makes this experience so good as well. And again, one to see at the cinema is, the effects work and just the sound design and everything just makes for this real cinematic experience. And not to say that, this isn't really a story or a character-driven film. It really is. If you want a lot more from this and you want to get into the detail of the characters and a lot of the lore and stuff that goes on here, with this film, if you really dig into the story, there's actually a lot going on here. It's actually quite a complicated film. But I also think that, if that isn't something that necessarily interests you, having to try and understand every single little aspect of this, and you want to kind of enjoy it more on face value as, this war of these two factions between these two families and characters, you can enjoy it as a cinematic experience from that perspective as well. I really don't think as well people should be put off by the running time. This is a nearly 3-hour film, which can be intimidating when you're looking at a hardcore science fiction film, but I think I never felt the running time here just because I was so engaged in everything that was going on. And whilst the first hour is quite slow burn, they do have a lot of little things in there to make this interesting. The character dynamics are interesting and you're intrigued to see, where the story's going to go, how certain conflicts are going to be concluded and stuff like that. So yeah, you're never bored during the film. There's no moments where I was sort of looking at the time thinking, "Cool, damn, we're only an hour in." I didn't feel like that at all. And when you do have slow burn films like this, it always means that when you have the bigger sort of payoffs towards the end, you feel them more. You feel the impact of them because you've taken that time with the characters, with the story, in order to properly build it up, rather than rushing everything and getting to the conclusion too prematurely. So again, it's a film that, once you know it's a slow burn, just let yourself get into this world and this story. I think you'll find that you'll really enjoy it, despite having, quite an intimidating runtime. Honestly, the closest I would get to a negative with this story is really just the fact that it is quite complicated and it probably does need a couple of watches in order to fully understand and take in everything that's going on. And it really doesn't affect my movie-going experience with a film like Dune. For some people who need to understand what's going on in every scene and can't just sort of let that go as you move on to the next scene, some parts of it might be a little bit frustrating for you. But I think, a lot of this story, that the main conflict, everything that's going on is fairly easy to follow and get along with. But as I say, on rewatches, if you want to pick out more details from this, you really can. But I do think, stuff like with even stuff with Rebecca Ferguson's character and the whole, was it the Bene Gesserit, and all of the lore surrounding that and how that guides them and how that fits into this world. A lot of that stuff even goes over my head at times, and I'm a Dune fan. I've seen the first one twice, I've seen this, and a lot of that stuff is still a little bit confusing for me. But, again, on rewatches, if you want to take more interest in what's going on there, read a little bit further into it, you can, and it will kind of flesh out this story even more. And again, I'm sure this is down to the fact that, these are enormous novels, great big books with tons of details. It's very difficult to fit everything in there. So if you're going to see this movie for the first time, I don't think you should be put off if there's certain aspects of the story that you don't fully understand what's going on with it, because I think if you just sort of let yourself enjoy it for what it is, more of these things will make sense as the story kind of develops and goes on towards, the sort of end of the film. So there's all of my first thoughts for you guys on Dune Part 2. I thought this was an absolutely astounding film and one you have to check out whilst it's still in the cinemas. And I kind of get a little bit torn for my rating between a 4.5 and a 5, but I've decided to go with a 5 out of 5. I can't fault the movie. You know, there's so many sequences that will give you chills. I came out, I wanted to talk to people about it. I wanted to tell people to see this. And I really did genuinely love every single minute of it. It's a fantastic film. And I do think that it's great to see a release like this come out, because these days I notice when I'm often scrolling through YouTube and, you know, I watch a lot of other movie reviewers and movie content stuff on YouTube, and so much of it is negativity about films that are out at the moment. The fact that, you know, we talk about blockbusters that end up being really disappointing. People talk about, is the cinema experience dying? People have fatigue with other expensive films like the superhero, the Marvel stuff, everything like that. So much negativity about modern movies. And I really do feel like Dune 2 is the answer to that. This is a movie that's come out that should really be getting people excited again about going out to the cinema with friends to experience proper films that have been made with love and care, and to bring us a really interesting story and making you feel like you've spent your hard-earned money well and having a great cinema experience. So I'm really happy to see a film like Dune 2 come out again early in the year, where we haven't really had anything particularly great come out this year so far. So it's fantastic to see. It's an amazing film, and I highly recommend you go out to see this whilst it's still out on the big screen. So that's all of my thoughts for you on Dune Part 2. As always, please do come and join me in the comments section and let me know your thoughts on the movie. Did it live up to your expectations? And did you enjoy this as much as the first part? I would love to know all of your thoughts on that. Also, please do consider subscribing to the channel if you've been enjoying my content. Got lots more good movie reviews and movie discussion coming soon. So if you enjoy all of that, please do subscribe and come and join me for that. Anyway, thanks so much for watching this review, and I'll see you next time.